Now, our next guest is Ryan Atkin. He is a National League referee, and none of that is particularly noteworthy in any great way. The reason Ryan is with us is he is, believe it or not, England's first openly gay professional official. Came out publicly in 2017, and he's joined us on the line. Ryan, thanks so much for making time.
No, thank you for having me.
Feel somewhat embarrassed in some respects because talking about someone's sexuality in 2018 feels a little bit redundant and old. But I suppose in the world of football, when you're England's first openly gay professional official, and we're still awaiting the first openly gay professional footballer, certainly across the English game, it does become a talking point or an issue. Your relationship with football, have you been a lifelong lover of football, played it, always wanted to be a referee?
Not always wanted to be a referee, no. I don't think it's something that you would go out and be as a 5-year-old boy. But during college, I found that my skills as probably playing rugby was better than football. But refereeing football at the time was something that I could do to stay in contact with my friends. You know, Monday morning in college, everything people talked about at the time, especially coming from Plymouth, was football. And so for me, it was a way of getting involved in the game. And actually, I quite enjoyed it. So it was something that I stuck at, and this is where I am now.
And how did you get into refereeing at National League level?
So I used to be an assistant referee on the Football League, the EFL, as it is currently. And the way the system works in the UK is you start out at a lower level, and every year you're assessed and you're pitted against your colleagues. And whoever ends up in the top percentage gets promoted. And I've, over the years, had a steady increase in my levels. So I referee on the National North and South League, and I'm a fourth official on the EFL. So that's where I currently sit in the system.
Ryan, how difficult is it to get to the level that you're at now then?
Extremely difficult. Yeah. I think people forget the year's service that you put in. So as a footballer, if you're 16, 17 or 18, you get picked for an academy side. You could be playing for the Premier League next season. A manager could just pick you and say, I want you. You sign a contract and you're playing in the Premier League. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately, for refereeing. You have to progress through the levels. Some years it's just not your year. You may have a run of a couple of bad games, and that can hold you back. So I've been refereeing now 17 years, and I'm at my level. There's another 2 levels to go before the Premier League, and so it's a long process for referees. And I know it's something that the Football Association have tried to streamline to get talent to the top as quick as they can.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're incredibly young, yet refereeing 17 years. What level, it would have been, of course, Sunday League level and schoolboy level, I would imagine then you would have been starting at. But when you get then into, I know you're still refereeing at National League level, but I would still call that professional football or professional environment anyway. So what level, or how old were you when you started refereeing paid players, I suppose you would say? Then that's what I would say maybe. How old are you when you started at that level?
So if you're talking about semi-pro...
that's the level I'm talking about. I'm not necessarily saying professional level, but yeah.
Semi-pro, I was probably... let's have a think now. Probably mid-20s. So 25, 24 when I was... Probably 23 when I was refereeing semi-pro. Some clubs now that I officiate are still semi-pro in the fact of players still have second jobs. Some teams have the finances to be classed as pro because all their players are on a contract basis and they don't have any other sources of income. So it's quite a mixed bag at the moment.
At what point were you open about your sexuality with family, friends, generally anyone that you came across to one degree or another?
So I'm from Plymouth in the United Kingdom, and my parents only found out probably 2 or 3 years before I came out publicly within football. When I moved from Plymouth to London, it was quite easy to lead a second life, and something that I've sort of quite regretted because it meant lying to my family about what I was up to, and some of the great achievements that I've achieved in my personal life through being gay. So they really only found out 2 or 3 years before I decided to publicly come out within football.
Okay, so that's when you're mid-20s territory almost?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any reason that you wanted to keep it away from family life?
Coming from Plymouth, slightly different upbringing as far as what people would consider to be normality. Plymouth is quite a small city. At the time, I think there was one LGBT bar in Plymouth. But moving to London gives you opportunities to explore who you are and where you want to go in life. And it's something that I discovered when I moved to London. I suppose I kept it secret at the time because, if we look back probably 8-10 years, being LGBT back then still wasn't as acceptable as it is now, really. And I think with Pride, I think with social media, I think with certainly TV, LGBT has become the norm. And hopefully in a few more years, we're not going to have to define ourselves as LGBT, and people aren't going to have to define themselves as race or ethnicity, and it will just be people.
Yeah, for sure. It's notable you say that you sort of regret not just coming out sooner, I suppose. Yeah,
I think certainly for my mum, she was quite hurt to the fact that I lied to her for a number of years about who I was as a person, and having, sort of parent conversations. Football suffered because I was lying. I wasn't being the best that I could be. I couldn't bring my whole personality to the game. I was always questioning myself or questioning what I had told colleagues, so that when you're in the changing room and you're talking about relationships or you're going out on a Saturday night, I always had to think about what I was saying. So you're always on the back foot, and it starts sort of to break you down mentally about who you told what, and leading a second life in some ways.
I guess for everybody it's an incredibly personal journey, and they have to deal with it themselves. Not that there's anything bad to deal with as such, but just process their situation themselves, then figure out, well, how does this interact with family, and then family and friends, and on it ripples out and on it goes. And there's nothing especially unique in any of that. I suppose in football it's unfortunately still pretty rare, to say the least. So were you worried about football and how it would be received within the football world? Tell us about that final step, I suppose.
So 2 or 3 seasons ago, I got demoted in my refereeing. I'd had a really poor season. I hadn't refereed well on the pitch. I was having personal issues off the pitch with being LGBT, which affected me both on and off the pitch. And I got demoted in refereeing. And when I sorted all those things out, and sort of really focused on my football and my refereeing, I made a big effort to sort of put those things to bed. I saw myself improve, and I got promoted back to the level that I'm at now. And when that happened, I decided that it was time, not only for me, but I think time for the game and potentially other people who are not just LGBT, but potentially have other things that are going on in their life that they feel could be impacting on their performance, to sort of come out and say, look, it's fine to be LGBT. It's fine to suffer potentially with people that, who declare that they've got potential mental health issues. And I know there's been a lot in the press recently around footballers who have come out and spoken about how mental health affects their performance. And for me as a referee, I didn't want my future, hopefully, or my career in refereeing to be impacted by one, having to live a lie and hiding who I was, and 2, not being able to bring my whole self to the game. And one of the arts of refereeing is bringing your personality to the game and managing people, and having that rapport and that relationship with players on the pitch. And if you have to pretend to be someone else, you're not actually being true to who you are, and they're not getting to see the real you. And I think that does impact on that relationship you can have with football and with players.
Ryan, you spoke about when you told your parents and your family and the reaction to that. Did you feel, off the back of that, after telling your family, did you feel as though you had to make some big announcement then within your own professional environment to tell the world? Did you have to do it like that, or was it just dropped subtly into conversations when you were chatting to the rest of the officials around you?
Not at all. It hadn't really crossed my mind at all, really, coming up to last August. It actually come about in a funny way. There's an LGBT-friendly football club called the London Titans, and there had been some communication sent out around a journalist who is LGBT, who was looking for stories around LGBT people in football, and for whatever reason the light bulb switched on, and I approached this individual and had a good chat with him, a long chat with him, and said, look, a referee, I've been involved in the professional game as an assistant referee, I've done the championship, these are the games that I've done, I'm now refereeing on the sort of the National South and National North League, this is why I want to do it. And he thought it was fantastic. We then approached the FA, the Premier League and the English Football League to sort of say to them, look, this is what we would like to do, these are the reasons why. And they were fully behind it. And I think they were fully behind it because there is nobody else. And I think for themselves as organisations, they see that it does need people to come forward to represent a community which they feel quite passionately about. And I think we see a lot in the press and in the media around sport and the fact that it doesn't always represent different communities. When it actually does, it just some communities are not as identifiable as others. And I think that was one of the reasons why when I did it, I felt comfortable that my colleagues wouldn't have an issue with it. Referees, as we discussed earlier, we've all worked extremely hard to get to where we are in a professional level. There's a lot of dedication there. And so I knew that them as a group from a professional point of view would be professional, and they have been, and I could not have asked for greater support. On the pitch, I wasn't sure how the relationship would be with players and managers, but nothing's changed whatsoever. I'm seen as Ryan, I'm a referee. It doesn't define me. I'm not the gay referee. I am when it comes to potentially media, because if I'm talking about LGBT, then it's important to talk about why I'm talking about it, which is because of football. But when I turn up to games or I'm officiating, I'm just Ryan, the referee. And I think that's a testament to the game, really.
And what about the terraces?
The terraces, well, it's quite hard to pick out individual comments. But for the games that I've been involved in, I think out of all last season, I had one negative comment where I give a free kick. I was quite close to the touchline, and an older gentleman shouted, "You can tell he's one of them from his haircut." And I just turned around and smiled and laughed at him. And it's in some ways it's water off a duck's back, because when you are a referee, you do learn to sort of have a thick skin, and you're able to control your emotions for most of the part. For the game, and not really take anything from it.
Yeah, it's not a great comment either, though. I mean, it's water off a duck's back, but can't be totally water off a duck's back either.
No, I mean, I've certainly heard worse comments, not through my sexuality, but other comments.
Sure.
And you do hear it, but when you think about it, I'm at a ground. I can't remember how many people were there on that day, but for one person out of, let's just say, a couple of hundred, that's pretty good odds. And that person themselves, I think, when people look around on them, they look a bit silly rather than actually the comment that they've made. And I think the best way for people to learn is to learn from their peers. And I think we are seeing that when you look at football itself and you look at LGBT friendly clubs. And I know that, for example, in Ireland, you've got the Dublin Devils and you've got the Cork Rebels, who are LGBT friendly clubs. They play 11-a-side and 5-a-side. They play in the GFSN league. Ireland had teams. They had teams from Ireland being represented at the gay games in Paris. But what you see now in football is you see a lot of Premier League and EFL clubs having LGBT supporter groups. And they do fantastic work within their clubs to be represented and to change opinion within the stands. And we're starting to see that ripple effect where people in the stadiums are learning off each other. They are being more thoughtful. We're not going to change it overnight. It's not going to change in a year or 2 years' time. It's going to be a slow process. But actually, as long as that process is started and it's moving in the right direction, I think that's all we can ask for, really.
Yeah, Ryan, just maybe going back to when you did make an announcement, when you've done a series of interviews, when you spoke to various broadcasters, when it has become mainstream, when your announcement then has become mainstream, did you have any nervousness around the next game that you were refereeing? Or how did you feel?
I was nervous because when we did the story, and it was originally done through Sky Sports, we wrote the article, myself and the reporter John Holmes, and we tweaked it over a number of months because we wanted to get it right. And originally it was only meant to go on the website as the platform, and Sky Sports News and Sky News picked up on it and wanted to do a sort of short 2-minute recording as like an interview around it. And I didn't think it was going to attract, the amount of attention it did. Some of the stories, some of the people that have been in contact from around the world, the fact it's been translated into so many different languages. For Sky Sports News, it beat the transfer deadline, which is a first for Sky Sports News, through the interest on the story. So for me, it certainly was a lot bigger than I expected, and the interest was a lot bigger. So refereeing that first game, I was extremely nervous because I thought, well, it's so big, it's in a lot of media outlets. Are people going to pass comment? And for the first couple of games, people, they come up to me, a couple of people shook my hand, a couple of managers came in and said, "Oh, well done for you, well done for what you've done." And that was it. And that's actually really positive, because while they've acknowledged it, it's then right. Let's get on with football. And that's a testament to the people at the level that I currently officiate at.
See, it doesn't shock me at all that was the reaction from everybody in the game, because we're all human beings. And actually, I was queasy enough about talking to you because I thought, well, this guy's no more defined by his sexuality than I am, and it just seems almost embarrassing to be talking about this issue in 2018, And yet, we do have the problem in the game whereby players don't feel comfortable coming out and sharing their sexuality. Although I'm sure lots of them probably are privately very open with certain teammates and their family and friends. So it's a tricky one. I mean, it strikes me the big issue is that terraces will slag the tall guy for being tall. They will slag the gingerhead guy for having ginger hair. They will slag the chubby lad if he's a bit fat. They will pounce on any perceived, and I emphasise the word perceived, weakness or thing that you can dig at someone. And so I suspect the great fear that any player has who plays in front of thousands of away fans on a given week is that, well, I'm perfectly comfortable in my own skin, but I'm not going to give all those idiots ammunition. And the other strange thing is, half of those idiots in normal life, if you want to call it normal life, away from the pitch, are friends with gay people, know gay people, but almost this herd mentality when you're in a stadium almost emboldens that attitude whereby you can just say things that you wouldn't ordinarily say. So you're kind of swirling around several different factors here, but that's where we sort of feel like we are in 2018. I have no doubt long term we're going to be fine, but at the moment, certainly football in particular has been outpaced by society.
Yeah, I think there are a number of factors, and I think you've actually summarised it quite well. I think when you look at football is a global sport. It's one of the only sports that touches all the corners, if the globe had corners, of the world. And you put a football down anywhere, and people would know what to do with it. They'd know to kick it. It's a very special sport in what it is. And so not only are you trying to change football in this country, but you've got FIFA, UEFA, CONCACAF, and a number of different other confederations trying to change the sport, where countries are influenced by current political stances. You've then got religion, you've then got faith, you've got belief. You've got all these other aspects that link into football that we are, the sport is trying to encourage involvement, inclusiveness within it. And I think for me, it all boils down to just treating people as equal, and it doesn't matter who or what they are. From the terraces, I do agree that sometimes I think people step through the turnstiles and they forget the outside world, and it's a complete bubble, and people lose sense of reality, and they get caught up in that sort of mentality of a group and chanting and shouting, and there's a lot of discussion around what banter is and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think in general people know what's appropriate and not appropriate, but they just don't engage their brain sometimes when they come into sports grounds or when they're chanting. And I think why would a player put himself to the forefront to potentially, and I say potentially, receive further abuse because of his sexuality? I think for players as well, where we are, because football is obviously global, time spent in the English Football League or the Premier League, they then have to think about what their future career is outside of the Premier League, and that plays a massive part. Is an openly gay player going to be able to play in Saudi Arabia or the Middle East or places within Europe? Because obviously each country is slightly different on its tolerance or its equality or inclusiveness, whatever words you want to describe what the current social climate is. We're now seeing America, where during this sort of Clinton and Obama periods was very pro LGBT, race, religion, faith. We have seen slightly a decline and obviously a sort of a backtracking under the current presidency, which potentially could put people off from playing in the MLS. Luckily, it hasn't. The MLS this year had a player who came out, which I think is great. Yeah. And it sort of shows that people are starting to stand up for what they believe in and who they are, because for them it's the right time. And I think that's really important. I was at a Rainbow Laces event at Wembley a couple of months ago, and I met Tom Bosworth, who is an Olympian, and he represented Team GB. And he was describing his coming out story, and I think he summed it up perfectly. He said, for him, when his stars aligned, and he talks about 5 things in his life that need to align or had to align for him to be comfortable to come out publicly. And that was things like family, relationship, job, sport. And it was only when all those things aligned for him did he feel that he was in the right place to come out publicly and represent a community that he feels proud of. So I think football is a long way away from that.
Do you really? You do think it is a long way away?
It's interesting, right? Honestly, you've spoke about your reaction from your colleagues, and you spoke about Robbie Rogers there and various players that have come out and spoke about the sexuality when they finished players, and the reaction that came from ex-teammates and all this sort of thing. There was no real reaction to it, and it just seems that why do we have to think about making this big announcement? Because that's what it's going to have to be for a player in this. And we talk 2018, and we still have to have a player that comes out and says, "I'm gay," and it's crazy to think in my mind that it wouldn't even be an issue within a dressing room. I'm convinced it would not even be an issue within a dressing room.
No, I think it's fear of the terrace. That's honestly, I think
totally.
It is, unfortunately.
I would agree with you. And when I say we're not there yet, I think within the footballing community, within teams, within clubs, people are who they want to be, and people will share what they want to be. That's not always put out publicly. I think when I said we're not there yet, I think there's a lot of education still needs to be done. If we look at
what can be done,
So I think if you look at campaigns like Kick It Out that have been around for over 25 years now, who have dealt with race in the game, they've had 25 years ahead of where LGBT education has gone in, not only on the terraces but into academies. For me, I would say the next person to come out potentially is going to be somebody playing in the academies, where there's better awareness and education on religion, faith, sexuality. And so you've got a different generation of players coming through. But there's so many factors that you've got to put into place. You've got to look at the management within football clubs. You've got to look at the talent scouts. What are they advising players to do? Because ultimately, that's their business. For a football player, their body, their legs, their skill is their business. And so if you've got a scout, and I'm not saying there are, but if you have got a scout who's encouraging you not to come out because of potential repercussions or value loss or whatever, then obviously a player is probably going to heed that advice. But on the flip side to that, for the first LGBT person within the male game, because let's not forget, we have got female players, we've got international female players who define themselves as lesbian or bi. For a male player to come out as bi or gay, I think, from a sponsorship point of view, they'll be set for life, because I think they will take that early step. Hopefully it will be somebody that's still playing in the game, and they will come out. Or it's going to be somebody that's due to retire, and they think, well, I've come to the end of my journey in football. I've got nothing to lose. But it's really encouraging when you look at a lot of documentaries and Craig Bellamy, for example, talks about his brother being LGBT, and the confidence that I think he shows around it. I think there'll be a positive reaction to a player coming out. As far as support, you will naturally get people that will always take it one step too far, and unfortunately, social media, because it's such an unruly atmosphere, people do feel that they can hide behind a keyboard or whatever to type some pretty awful things. And I've experienced that myself, but I learned to ignore it. I didn't, I never sort of took it personally per se. But I would agree to an extent that if a player chose to come out publicly because it was the right thing for them to do, I think they would be supported.
Yeah. So I guess the plan for you is to make it to Premier League level ultimately with your own career, Ryan.
Yeah, I would love to. And one of the real positive things that have come that's been sort of made clear to me from the footballing governing bodies is that they will support me all the way. They'll support all the LGBT work that I'm doing within the game and within my own personal life. But I will not receive any positive discrimination, and that's something that was, I felt really proud of, because it would be easy to promote somebody quicker because they're LGBT or they're black or they're Asian or whatever. And actually for them to say, we're treating you like everyone else, it's got to be on talent, is actually a really positive message. So, I will continue to push within football to be the best that I can be. And hopefully the ball runs smoothly for me and, I get those opportunities to get promoted.
Yeah, you just said earlier, you said about the promotion. At the end of every season, you're getting assessed. So, obviously, at the end of this season, then, is your next step, of course, it would be to get into the Football League then. Is that where you're hoping to go within the next year or two?
Yeah, so my next step is National League, what they call. So you've got, in the UK, they broke down the league. So you've got the Premier League, the EFL, the National League, which used to be the old football conference, and then they divided that up into North and South then. So currently operating on the North and South League, my next step would then the National League full time, then operating. So theoretically, a realistic goal would be to be in the Championship for the Football League within the next probably 4 to 5 years, with the intention of getting into the Premier League. It is a shame that people who have the talent, and I'm not saying I have, but other people that have got the talent can't be picked at a younger age, or any age really, and put into higher grades, because it does take a long time. If you have to start at level 8 at the bottom, and you've got to you've got to work your way up. You're assessed throughout the season. You've got somebody coming to watch you throughout the season, potentially every other game, and you're getting assessed and you're getting marked against competence criteria. It only takes for you to have a bad game and that mark be very low for you then to destroy your average over the season, and you could miss out on promotion by one place. But the governing bodies know that you're a good referee, so it can take you a long time to get there. And whereas other people who have done really, really well, I think Michael Oliver is a shining example that he's worked extremely hard, and he's got to where he is in the Premier League and now a FIFA referee from working really hard and having great games and being rewarded. And I think that's the flip side of it. It can be done. It's not as frequent, I think, as the governing bodies would like, but that's the system that's in place, and we all operate to that.
Ryan, thanks so much for talking to us. The very best of luck with the rest of your career.
No, thank you very much. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, Ryan.